Most men think they already understand what's normal when it comes to sex in America. They assume desire stays high if attraction is strong, that frequency reflects masculinity, and that changes are mostly psychological. But when researchers step back and look at population level data, a quieter pattern emerges. Desire doesn't disappear, it reallocates. Age, sleep debt, chronic stress, metabolic health, circulation, and hormone signaling slowly reshape how the male brain prioritizes intimacy. This isn't about morality, porn, or explicit behavior. It's about how modern life subtly trains male biology. Long work hours blunt testosterone rhythms. Inflammation narrows blood vessels long before symptoms appear. Anxiety steals attention from sensation. What looks like loss of interest is often a shift in capacity, not character. The gap between what men think they should feel and what their bodies can support creates confusion, silence, and self-blame. This video isn't here to embarrass or alarm you. It's here to translate behavior into biology, calmly, clinically, and show what these trends reveal about control, performance, and long-term vitality without hype, shame, or promises. Just clarity men can actually use today. From a medical perspective, sexual trends are never just cultural noise. They're signals. Patterns of desire, avoidance, and preference reflect how well key systems are communicating inside the male body. Testosterone signaling, dopamine sensitivity, vascular responsiveness, and stress regulation. Clinicians don't look at sex as indulgence, they look at it as feedback. When desire narrows, becomes effortful, or shifts away from physical intimacy, it often parallels measurable changes: flattened hormone rhythms, reduced nitric oxide production, chronic cortisol exposure, or nervous system fatigue. These changes show up in behavior before they show up on lab reports. This is what we can call behavioral desire mapping, the idea that what a man wants, avoids, or tolerates sexually is a map of how his body is allocating energy and reward. Society frames sex as entertainment or performance. Medicine treats it as a window. Paying attention doesn't mean judging yourself. It means reading the dashboard instead of ignoring warning lights. Men who understand this gain leverage. They stop guessing, stop self-blaming, and start recognizing patterns early, when control is still possible, and small adjustments create outsized long-term gains over time with age and modern lifestyle pressures globally. At the lower end of the list, numbers 10 through 8, we see patterns most men expect. These are the familiar, predictable choices. They require little preparation, minimal coordination, and almost no performance uncertainty. From the outside, they look like preference. From the inside, they often reflect efficiency. As men age or accumulate stress, the body becomes more selective with energy. Testosterone signaling is more fragile. Dopamine spikes are harder to trigger. Blood flow becomes less forgiving of anxiety or distraction. Familiar behaviors reduce demand on all of those systems at once. There's less novelty to process, fewer variables to manage, and a lower threshold for physical readiness. Nothing here is pathological. In fact, this shift often feels comforting. Predictability reduces pressure, and pressure is expensive metabolically. But medicine pays attention to why comfort becomes dominant. When novelty response dulls, it's often because reward circuitry is conserving resources. When spontaneity fades, circulation and nervous system timing are usually involved. This is where clarity matters. These patterns don't mean something is wrong. They mean the body is optimizing around constraints. Familiarity feels safe, but it can also quietly signal changes in hormonal resilience, vascular efficiency, and how much margin the system still has for challenge. At number 7, the pattern shifts from convenience to protection. This form of intimacy is chosen not because desire is low, but because stress is high. When cortisol remains elevated, whether from work pressure, financial strain, sleep disruption, or constant cognitive load, the nervous system starts prioritizing safety over stimulation. This is where stress shield intimacy comes in. It's a behavioral adaptation. The body seeks connection without activating performance anxiety, cardiovascular demand, or complex emotional negotiation. The brain reads this as efficient, reward without risk. For men operating in chronic stress mode, this trade-off feels rational, not indulgent. Biologically, cortisol suppresses testosterone signaling and interferes with nitric oxide pathways that support blood flow. Mental fatigue dulls focus and makes novelty feel like effort. In that state, high-demand intimacy can trigger pressure instead of pleasure. Lower-risk options allow closeness without activating the fight-or-flight response. Many men interpret this shift as fading desire or aging failure. Clinically, it's the opposite. The nervous system is protecting capacity. It's choosing stability while under load. The important insight isn't to judge the behavior, it's to recognize what it reveals. Stress hasn't eliminated desire. It's simply changed the rules under which desire feels safe to express. At number 6, the pattern becomes more psychological than physical. This trend centers on connection without an outcome to prove. No benchmarks, no expectations, no silent scorekeeping. For many men, that neutrality feels like relief. From a performance psychology standpoint, fear of failure is one of the fastest ways to disrupt arousal. The moment the brain starts monitoring results, it pulls resources away from sensation and into evaluation. Blood flow follows attention. When attention is hijacked by self-checking, the body hesitates. This isn't weakness, it's neurobiology. Activities that remove outcome pressure allow the system to stay relaxed. They preserve confidence in the short term because nothing is at risk. The nervous system remains regulated and cortisol stays lower. For men who've experienced inconsistency or embarrassment in the past, this feels stabilizing. The contrast matters, though. While performance-neutral connection protects confidence today, it can quietly stall recovery if it becomes the only lane. Avoidance prevents feedback. Without feedback, the systems that adapt, vascular responsiveness, hormone signaling, and confidence loops, don't get challenged. This isn't a call to force anything. It's an invitation to understand the trade-off. Awareness creates leverage. When men recognize why neutrality feels safer, they can choose when to protect themselves and when to gently rebuild capacity, on their terms, without judgment or pressure. At number 5, the shift is no longer about intimacy style, it's about stimulation source. This is where dopamine drift becomes visible. Over time, the brain learns to favor rewards that arrive faster, require less physical effort, and carry no interpersonal uncertainty. Neurologically, dopamine is about anticipation, not pleasure itself. When high-intensity stimuli are repeatedly available on demand, novelty thresholds rise. What once felt engaging now feels muted. Physical intimacy hasn't become less meaningful. The reward system has become less sensitive. Digital substitution fits a tired nervous system perfectly. No timing, no vulnerability, no cardiovascular demand. The brain gets a signal without asking the body to fully participate. From a survival standpoint, it's efficient. From a long-term vitality standpoint, it's costly. Importantly, this isn't about moral judgment or addiction language. Most men experiencing dopamine drift are functional, productive, and unaware it's happening. They interpret the change as personal decline rather than neural adaptation. The concern here isn't panic, it's trajectory. Left unaddressed, reward circuitry continues recalibrating upward, but the same plasticity that allows drift also allows recovery. Sensitivity isn't lost, it's deferred. With time, spacing, and deliberate recalibration, the system can respond again. Understanding this early preserves options later. At number 4, behavior becomes organized. Intimacy is planned, timed, and placed on the calendar. On the surface, this looks like discipline and responsibility. Beneath it, there's often an attempt to regain certainty. This is what we can call calendar confidence, the belief that structure restores control. Psychologically, scheduling reduces anxiety. There are no surprises, no guessing, no pressure to perform spontaneously. For men who value predictability, this feels stabilizing. The mind relaxes because the outcome is pre-negotiated. Biology, however, doesn't operate on calendars. Sexual readiness depends on rhythms, sleep quality, circadian testosterone pulses, blood flow responsiveness, and nervous system tone. These fluctuate daily. When intimacy becomes rigid, the body may not align with the plan, even if the intention is strong. The illusion of control appears when men mistake frequency for function. Checking the box can preserve confidence in the short term, but it risks disconnecting sensation from timing. The body learns compliance, not responsiveness. Medicine favors flexibility over rigidity, not chaos, responsiveness. When men tune into rhythms instead of schedules, they regain real control. Desire becomes signal-driven again, not obligation-driven. Structure can support intimacy, but when it replaces biological feedback, it quietly undermines the very control it's meant to protect. At number 3, novelty re-enters the picture, but not for the reasons most men assume. This isn't recklessness or escalating desire. It's often compensation. When physiological response weakens, the brain searches for stronger input. This is the circulatory feedback loop at work. Erection quality and physical arousal are heavily dependent on vascular efficiency. When blood flow becomes less responsive due to endothelial stiffness, inflammation, or reduced nitric oxide availability, the same stimuli no longer produce the same signal. The brain interprets this as insufficient input, not impaired circulation, so it raises the volume. New scenarios, stronger novelty, sharper contrast. From the outside, this looks like increased libido. Clinically, it's the opposite. The system is working harder to achieve the same effect. This is where a common myth needs correction. Novelty doesn't mean desire is rising. It often means efficiency is falling. The nervous system is compensating for a physical bottleneck, not expressing excess drive. The important takeaway isn't to suppress novelty, it's to decode it. When novelty becomes necessary instead of optional, it's a sign to restore the underlying system, improve vascular health, reduce inflammation, normalize sleep and stress rhythms. When circulation improves, responsiveness returns, and novelty naturally becomes choice again, not requirement. At number 2, the data surprises many men, not because it's extreme, but because it contradicts cultural training. A large number of men are actively prioritizing intimacy without goals, benchmarks, or visible success markers. No focus on duration, no emphasis on outcomes, just presence. Culturally, this is framed as decline. Medically, it's often recovery. This type of intimacy activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for repair, digestion, and restoration. Oxytocin increases, cortisol drops, and heart rate variability improves. Blood flow becomes smoother, not forced. For men coming out of long periods of stress, illness, or performance anxiety, this state is not avoidance, it's recalibration. The shock isn't the behavior itself, it's how common it has become among men who are otherwise disciplined, productive, and physically capable. They aren't giving up control, they're restoring it quietly. Performance-driven intimacy demands readiness on command. Recovery-based intimacy rebuilds readiness over time. One drains, the other refills. When men understand this distinction, embarrassment dissolves. What replaces it is relief and a more grounded form of confidence. This trend reflects calm masculinity, strength without proving, presence without pressure, and a long-term strategy for vitality that prioritizes nervous system health as much as hormones or circulation. At number 1 is the trend few men expect, but many are quietly choosing: intentional reduction paired with restoration. Not avoidance, not loss, strategy. This is strategic sexual recovery, the decision to step back temporarily so the system can rebuild forward. Medically, this makes sense. testosterone signaling doesn't recover overnight. Vascular responsiveness improves on the scale of weeks, not days. The nervous system needs repeated periods of low demand to restore sensitivity, timing, and confidence. Constant stimulation, even mild, can keep systems stuck in compensation mode. Men practicing this aren't disengaged, they're recalibrating. They reduce frequency to restore intensity. They protect dopamine sensitivity instead of chasing it. They allow blood flow, hormones, and parasympathetic tone to realign without pressure to perform on command. The real shock isn't that desire fades, it's that capacity returns when space is created. Less input allows clearer signals. Fewer demands allow stronger responses. This reframes control. Strength isn't forcing readiness. It's knowing when to recover so readiness becomes reliable again. There's no countdown here, no promise of speed, just a timeline biology actually follows. For men willing to think long term, this is empowering. Nothing is broken, nothing is lost. With patience, awareness, and strategic restraint, the body remembers how to respond, calmly, confidently, and on its own terms.